Good evening. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ellen Renee Adams, and I have the honor of being the president of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond. Thank you to each one of you for joining together tonight to ensure we raise our collective voice. Thank you to the Federation's JCRC Chair, Amy Melnick-Scharf, and JCRC Director, David Cohen, for all of their work in being a voice for everyone in our community, a place where we can all be heard and all come together. Our theme this year is Here for Good. We have seen the importance of community, compassion, and caring over the past 2 years. As our worlds turned inward, we, our community, looked outward, helping our neighbors, supporting equality, standing against the rise in anti-Semitism, and being a voice for Israel. And we were there for each other. There was so much good that happened. The reality, however, is that goodness can't be quantified. It's hard to measure how big a smile is or how important a friendly call or visit is. But you can be assured that if we could measure the good, our Federation would have unbelievable returns and impact. Federation does heartfelt and hugs like few others. Those are our specialty. Today is about working to ensure our collective voice is heard, speaking proudly about the issues that matter to us and how together with our elected officials, we can strengthen the Jewish and general community. I am grateful that each of you took the time to be with us and look forward to important and substantive conversations today and tomorrow. And once again, thank you, Amy, for your ongoing leadership in making all of this happen.
Thank you so much, Ellen Renee, and thank you for your leadership. Good evening and welcome again to this year's annual virtual legislative reception. My name is Amy Melnick-Scharf, and I am the chair of the Jewish Community Relations Committee here at Federation. And I'm really excited to have such a cross-section of our community with us here tonight. There is so much that unites us as a community. We have diverse political opinions, but our work together and our attendance here tonight shows that we are united in our mutual concerns and commitment to advocate for our community based on our shared values. The JCRC here at Federation, we work all year long in a nonpartisan way to educate our elected officials and community partners and work with our community partners. We're grateful to all of you for coming to tonight, and especially our senators and delegates who have joined us this evening, Senator Dunnavant, Senator McClellan, and Delegate VanValkenburg. We're grateful for our partnership and know this is just one conversation of many, and look forward to seeing more of you in these coming months. Our first ask is really easy. If you or your staff have not already, and in our community members too, if you have not been following the Federation's JCRC Facebook page, please do so. It is a really easy way to keep tabs on the issues that we care about. Again, it's JCRC Richmond on Facebook. As we navigate this new normal that we are here in now, wanted to just remind everyone, as Ellen Renee said, we have been here, the Federation, being part of our community for 85 years, and we look forward to serving the community for the next 85. So our message to you this evening centers on the following. We work, the JCRC committee has many volunteers, many who are with us tonight, but we wanted to focus tonight on what we believe underpins all of our work. Our efforts to highlight and address the rise in anti-Semitism nationally and here in the Commonwealth. And you can help us by helping us in 4 specific ways. And if you remember nothing else, it boils down to these 4 things. 1, safety for our community. If we can't be safe going to the JCC or our houses of worship, that's a basic human right. And we ask you to support the efforts to include $3 million in the governor's budget for hate crime prevention, specifically for a nonprofit grant program that our Federation led advocacy efforts to begin this past year. 2, improve Holocaust and genocide education and awareness in the Commonwealth to help stem the rising tide of not just anti-Semitism, but white supremacy and other forms of hate. And 3, As we join together to combat racism and bigotry, let us all work together to ensure that anti-Semitism is also included in the Commonwealth's efforts to address diversity and inclusion, as we are a group also that is targeted for our differences. And 4, help us challenge boycott, divestment, and sanctioning of Israel at universities throughout the Commonwealth. And I would like to spend a few moments to unpack these 4 interrelated issues. This past summer, the FBI released its 2020 hate crime statistics, which showed that overall, unfortunately, hate crimes were up, but crimes targeting Jewish people comprised 55% of all religious bias hate crimes. Don't misunderstand me. Every hate crime is heinous and unacceptable, no matter its target. And we must stand resolutely with any targeted group, and we do. We work with our interfaith and intergroup partners to build a better and more just Henrico, Richmond, and Chesterfield, and we will continue that work. But yet the fact is American Jews, who make up no more than 2% of the US population, less than, are the targets of nearly 60% of religious bias crimes. This should set off alarm bells. So what can we do? Again, there's 4 things. 1, the governor's budget. Please help us advocate to include funding for grants for nonprofits. This funding was new this year, but the rollout of this program, unfortunately, has been disappointing, and we are asking for your help in working with the administration to have these funds better targeted to the intended recipients. 2, Holocaust education. We want to thank those of you who voted to establish the Advisory Committee on Diversity and Inclusion, which included in its charter the mission to improve Holocaust education and the history of anti-Semitism. The committee has completed its work, and this year we will be examining what additional steps could be taken to improve Holocaust and genocide education. However, I cannot let this opportunity with you and our community go by without mentioning the appalling frequency of some elected officials in the Commonwealth. None in our area, thank God, but it has occurred in our Commonwealth, in our nation, and in our nation's top news networks just recently, using Holocaust imagery and comparisons that insult the memory of the millions tortured and murdered in the Holocaust solely because they were Jewish. Nothing in American politics today should be compared to the atrocities that were committed against innocent men, women, and children. A recent news commentator on a national network compared Tony Fauci to Joseph Mengele. And I just need that to sink in a moment. Of course, we respect our community, the Jewish community respects free speech. Criticism of public figures, I'm sure our guests tonight, senators and delegates, understand criticism of public figures goes with the territory. Healthy debate is normal. But to compare one of our nation's longest serving public servants and researcher who has built his career on saving and improving human lives to Joseph Mengele, we must all say, no, that is not okay. If we were together, I would say, repeat after me. No, that is not okay. Mengele conducted inhumane medical experiments based on racial theories on prisoners at Auschwitz, often involving live organ removal, mutilation, poisoning, sterilization. I never thought I would need to publicly ask our elected officials from refraining from these comparisons. And again, not saying any of you would ever do this, but by saying there is any direct comparison between mask mandates and pandemic mitigation with the experience of Jews who were denied all civil rights, denied their humanity, placed in ghettos and murdered during the Holocaust, denies the scope of that uniquely Jewish experience. So we obviously have a real problem with Holocaust education in this country. And we have heard from local officials when we have approached some privately that they didn't really understand how offensive these types of comparisons are. If you can mute yourself, thank you. So if you see it happen, if any of you see it happen, if you hear on the news, or if you hear any of your colleagues start going down that road and making those comparisons, please just say, stop. That is not okay. Thank you. Number 3, still, I'll work through the last 2 pretty quickly. Number 3, Rabbi Dr. Laura Novak Weiner has said one of the very first lessons in the Torah and the Bible prioritizes the following. All human beings are created equal in God's image. All. The belief in equality and now equity compels action in response to discrimination, racism, and racial injustice. As we join together with community partners to combat racism and bigotry, let's work together to ensure anti-Semitism is also included in the Commonwealth's efforts as a group that is also routinely targeted for our differences. And finally, 4, we have just come face to face with the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement of Israel here at the Commonwealth and at Virginia Tech. The BDS movement is increasingly an onerous problem nationally, and although we value free expression, which is the bedrock of our democracy, when that free expression crosses a line into anti-Semitism, we need to speak up. This is what recently happened at Virginia Tech, and we are concerned this will become a pattern throughout the Commonwealth and specifically at universities. Jewish students and staff attending these universities have a right to go to school in peace. And our federation unequivocally condemns the boycott, divestment, and sanction resolution that passed the Graduate and Professional Students Senate of Virginia Tech just in late October. This BDS resolution not only demonizes and delegitimizes Israel, but it challenges Israel's very right to exist. And that is why at its core, it is anti-Semitic. The resolution includes facts claiming that Palestinians are lynched in Israel. That is completely false. And that's not a difference of opinion. You can have a difference of opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Here in the US, here in the Commonwealth, we have a history of lynching. It's a terrible history. We should know more about this history, and our children should be taught about the history of lynching. But to imply that our democratic ally in Israel is doing what has occurred to other populations, it demeans the victims of lynching in the US. It is not a comparison. We have asked the administration at Virginia Tech to reflect on their relative silence so far on this controversy, and whether if other stereotypes and tropes and lies about other cultural or minority groups would be allowed to be aired to Virginia Tech Student Senate without a response from the administration. In accordance with our Virginia General Assembly resolution from 2016 condemning BDS, and in solidarity with many other major universities, we were hoping Virginia Tech would vocally oppose the BDS resolution. This has not yet happened. So now we are asking that now that you are aware, we are asking for some separate time where we can sit down, talk about this issue. We understand it is complex, and ask for your support as we further explain and discuss how anti-Zionism has become the new anti-Semitism. So now we do look forward to hearing from you what your priorities are and how we can help you in your efforts in this session. And in closing, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory in the UK said the following: others wait for something to happen. Leaders make something happen. While others curse the darkness, a leader lights the light. As our elected leaders, we look to you to make good things happen here in our Commonwealth. Thank you for being here. And now it is my pleasure to turn things over to David Cohen, JCRC Director, and I want to thank him and Richard Samet, Chair of the JCRC Subcommittee for Legislative Affairs, for planning this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate the kind words and absolutely appreciate the framing of all the work that we do and how important it is and how core it is to the work of the Federation. So thank you so much. I'm just going to frame the next section of our meeting, our night, in terms of what we're looking to do, and then bring on our legislators one at a time by seniority. You've heard the framing from Amy, my partner in crime, with what it is we hope to accomplish and what we hope to bring to people's attention. We also want you to know we've been working on all of these things with these amazing legislators. So what we're looking for them to highlight is, one, the work they've already done with us, the amazing work and the things we've accomplished together. Secondly, we have a session coming up. We have goals that are in alignment, and they have goals. So the issue is, what is it that they hope to accomplish in the coming session? And I think that's really what we want to hear about. So I'm going to end it there. I'm actually going to bring on Senator Dunnavant first to really just kind of have a conversation with us and in a sense, give us your thoughts. Again, you've heard a lot from us, a little bit of what we're concerned about in the kind of coming year and what we've been concerned about. Thank you for coming on. And why don't we just start there? Reflect on some of the things from the past year that you've accomplished, that you've worked with us on, and then we can move to what you hope to accomplish in the coming session.
Thank you, David, so much. I'm so happy to be with you guys again. And I want to express again how grateful I was to be with you at Beth Ahaba Synagogue in July, when there was the first community union coming together of so many different faiths to demonstrate an absolute intolerance of the hate language that we were hearing that really was bubbling up at that time. It was shocking. It was jarring to me. I can't imagine how awful it was for you. And so I thought that was beautifully done and absolutely symbolic of what you talk about, which is bringing together that interfaith support of appreciating the value of God in every person, all created equal, all to be valued, all to be respected. And I think we're at a strange time right now. We're at a time in history where we have a couple of things happening that I think create a slippery slope for dismissing human beings and not valuing the similarities we have and focusing instead on differences. And those two things are people not fact checking. You know, we're talking about what the accusations were against Israel at the time, and even with BDS, the accusations, people are aligning themselves with a statement or a particular policy without actually doing the research to determine if it's true. And I think that's what's particularly alarming about Virginia Tech. I think that student senate, that graduate student senate that passed that resolution, I cannot think of how that constructively contributed to the education at Virginia Tech at all. It certainly maligned the opportunity for additional research or even internships or study abroad. And I was and remain very disappointed that the administration couldn't see the difference between the ability to disagree and debate and the action of passing a policy that was reprehensible. So I loved your response to that. I thought that multitude of organizations that got together to respond and challenge the administration to actually decide was very well handled. As far as legislation, well, you know, again, I just want to thank you for your community service. We've talked about this before, what everybody did during COVID, but how all of the different denominations aligned to care for people who did not have the opportunity to maybe go to the grocery store or to have many of their needs met. You guys really were great leaders in that, as you always are, and we thank you. As far as looking at legislation, I am very much aligned with everything you represent because I very much agree that we are here to recognize the beauty in every person, embrace that, respect that. You'll always see me supporting legislation that is non-discriminatory and supporting education. And as I look forward to the next year and figure out, I always say that, legislating is a way that you interpret what your values and your goals are, and you find a way to utilize your public service to bring about actions that actually represent those values. So as I look forward to what I'm going to be doing this year, there's going to be a lot with the Secretariat of Health and Human Resources. We have a new administration coming in, and that's a different way to look at things. And I am particularly interested in the way that we can address the behavioral health and mental health crises that we're having in Virginia now, and the crises with overdose and opiates and abuse. And I think that we can do that effectively with some measures that we have in place. There's a program that was started probably now about 5 years ago through DMAS or Medicaid, which is called ARTS, and that's Addiction Rehabilitation Treatment Services. But we're not really connecting to a lot of people that are in need of those services. And we saw that particularly noticeably during COVID, when we've seen a 30% rise in overdose. And so in conversations with our courts and looking at how we do things at DMAS, there's an intersection between the courts who have many of the people coming through that have opiate addictions, have had overdoses, or have opportunities. And our courts are actually treating those Virginians in their drug courts. They're actually providing medical services and rehabilitation services. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to have an intersection of enrolling those individuals who are generally always eligible for Medicaid into the services so we can connect them to ARTS. We have a population in the courts. The courts are kind of left with one choice, and that's to send people to jail. We have a lot of data and evidence now that up to 80% of the people in our jails have mental health disorders, but we don't have an option for the court to get them mental health care. And so jails are becoming our mental health treatment centers of last resort. It's the same thing with addiction. Our drug courts are busting at the seams. They could handle many more numbers in capacity and give people an alternative to going to jail if we could intersect the judges with an option other than jail. And I think we have the ability to do that and really meet some of the needs. Part of the problem with how we address these issues in Virginia and in any state that's organized is that there are silos of funding. And those silos tend to exclude intersection that human beings naturally make between the silo of criminal justice or the silo of Medicaid. And so we have to find a way to navigate that. And I think this is one of the ways that we can do that. I would like to see us working towards behavioral health services and case management in schools. 1 in 3 of our children are on Medicaid, and we are not doing early detection for things like autism, sometimes not even for dyslexia, which up to 20% of kids have. We've really been fighting to get that recognized. And this is very frustrating because we know through great evidence and research that early intervention in these issues for children returns them to the normal learning curve. Instead of them, getting so far off track that they no longer can participate in the opportunity of education, which is opportunity for the American dream. So these intersections between school and healthcare and courts and healthcare are things that I'm going to be looking at. We're going to be recovering for a long time from the effects of COVID in schools. We don't need to exacerbate that now with kids being out for quarantine. I know I've heard from so many moms that when their kids get sick, they have to take them to their pediatrician or to Patient First for testing. They're out of school for 5 to 8 days. They miss more of their education. They have worksheets because we don't have virtual education paralleling in-person education. We can fix a lot of those things. There's great evidence out of UK and other states are using it where you can keep kids in school when you quarantine them. And you can do a rapid test to every other day and screen for symptoms, and there's no increased transmission. But we need to have a Virginia Department of Health that is going to create kind of the guidelines for how schools can do that. We are utilizing our Virginia resources. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Freyland Biomedical Research Institute in Roanoke. They're doing great work. They know how to reverse trauma in children so that we can help children not really have a chance at a life by overcoming trauma. But they also are developing a very inexpensive rapid test for us to use in schools that will help us keep kids in schools. So we're going to be working on that. We're going to be back to making sure kids have access to virtual education if they're out of school. We're going to be looking at, I have a safety and mental health app for kids in schools. We now have a new crises intervention service in the state of Virginia and a hotline, but kids don't function on hotlines. That's what old people do. We need to put that into an app form so we can really reach into this teen suicide risk. They have access to care. So those are things that I'm going to be looking at. We have a lot of work to do to make it easier to bring health professionals into the state. We're facing a healthcare workforce crisis, and there's some learning opportunities we have from COVID about making it a little bit easier for licensees to get into the state while still protecting the citizens with safety and quality.
Senator, I don't mean to interrupt, but one of the things I just wanted to say, one of the things we appreciate about all our legislators is each of you have a passion in a focus area that is so valuable to our community. We had you on a call. We were glad to have you on a call during COVID that was so informational and so instructional. And the fact that these areas you're telling us about are what you care about and what you're going to be working on. I mean, that's exactly what our community wants to hear. What is it that people are doing in the General Assembly? So, don't worry about, how long. This is exactly what we want to hear about. And we can't thank you enough for coming tonight, for sharing this with us, and for all the work that you do. So thank you so much. And I just want to say to everyone, while you're still on, if you do have questions for any of the legislators, if you heard something from Senator Dunnavant or any of the upcoming speakers, put your questions in the chat. They will come to the hosts, and we'll pick a few, great little diamonds in the rough by the end, and hopefully have time to ask a few of them. So I'll let you close, but I just wanted to again thank you for coming on tonight and for sharing with us.
No, thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I do have a passion for this. You're right. I really think that we have the opportunity to speak the truth, to do what's right for every human being in Virginia, especially those that can't help themselves, that we need to make sure they have access to services that can help them participate in the American dream. That's always how I see it, is that, we need to overcome obstacles so everybody has a chance. And I appreciate your time, and I could go on forever.
Right.
But I am going to pass the baton over to Senator McClellan.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And Senator McClellan, you are on deck. So bringing you on in just 3, 2, 1 seconds. Thank you again, Senator Dunnavant.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you all for having me tonight. I was originally going to be in the morning, but came on tonight. So if you hear at any point my children screaming in the background, it is because they were expecting me to be completely free and are a little salty that I am holed up in my daughter Samantha's room. But hopefully their dad will keep them occupied for a while. So I first want to celebrate our successes. And let me just, well, actually, before I celebrate our successes, let me say, I really appreciate that in your advocacy papers, you recognize, and it's very clear in your advocacy papers, that racism and anti-Semitism, unfortunately, are twins that often rise and fall together in rhetoric and in action. And over the past year, or almost 2 years, we have seen an increase in both anti-Semitism and racism, not surprisingly. And regardless of the community, whether it is the Jewish community, the Asian community, the African-American community, all of which have seen a rise in both rhetoric and in action rooted in hate, we come together. And we did that this year. We will continue to do that in years to come. And I think sometimes people forget that the Black community and the Jewish community were partners in the civil rights movement every step of the way, and will continue to be so going forward. And so as Vice Chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, I just want to acknowledge that partnership, because it is rooted in kinship and our shared humanity. And so having done that, I'm going to come back to that. But first, I want to celebrate our successes. In the 2021 session, I worked on 3 issues that were very important to you. The first was some of which we succeeded and some of which we didn't. The first was getting disability as a basis for discrimination in the Virginia Human Rights Act. We were able to do that. That was on the heels of strengthening the Human Rights Act, our anti-discrimination provisions in housing, in employment, and in public accommodations. So we continue to strengthen our anti-discrimination laws together. Working to include training and cultural competency and anti-bias for teachers. Not only did I help get the legislation passed, but I'm actually on the ABTEL committee that is putting those curricula and training and guidelines in place as we speak for our teachers. And then, so those are successes. Worked with Senator Ghazala Hashmi to strengthen our hate crimes law. Unfortunately, that was not successful. I believe she's putting that bill back in. Have not confirmed that yet because we have bill limits this year, but that is an area we still have work to do. My priorities this session are in a couple of buckets. First, globally, protect the progress we made over the past 2 years. Virginia made generational change that was long overdue in a wide variety of issues, becoming the first state in the South to do everything from have our own Voting Rights Act, which is not only the first in the South, but one of the strongest in the country, to become, to have 100% clean energy standard, which is one of the strongest in the country, to extend worker rights to domestic workers, first state in the South to do that, to transform our criminal justice system. I will be working to protect that progress because it's not only popular, but it was necessary. And one area in particular, we made a lot of progress that I'm worried about is in addressing inequities and in having something positive come out of the reckoning with racial injustice as a result of the murder of George Floyd. That is something we have been striving for. Virginia was the birthplace of American democracy, but it was also the birthplace of the American slave trade. And our 400-year struggle has been, how do we live up to the ideals upon which our country was founded? That all men and women are created equal and treated equally under the law, when for so many years that was not true. We started to make real progress. We started very slowly in response to the Unite the Right rally, but we made light speed progress in the summer of 2020 and in 2021. And I want to make sure we protect it, because what we have seen nationally, and yes, it has bled over into Virginia, is a backlash against that. The whole debate over critical race theory is not really about critical race theory. It is about, because most people, and I've asked people on the street who say they don't support critical race theory in our schools. And I'm like, well, what is it? And I get, well, I don't know, but I'm against it. And when you really dig in, and we've seen this in legislation across the country, when you really dig in, it is a pushback against teaching the bad and the ugly in our country's history and in our Commonwealth's history in a way that helps us heal address it and move forward. And so I'm worried that the cultural competency and the anti-bias legislation that we passed will be under attack. I'm worried that the efforts that we made to teach a true and complete history in Virginia are going to come under attack. And I will be fighting against that. Two other areas really quickly. Public education has always been a top priority for me. You've heard a lot in the news about a budget surplus. I asked the question, is it a real surplus if we have not met our needs as a Commonwealth? If we are not fully funding our K-12 education system, which we're not, then can we really say we have a surplus? So once again, I will be putting in legislation to fully implement and fund the recommended standards of quality from the Board of Education. That is everything from staffing ratios for support personnel like counselors, and social workers, and nurses, to meet the mental health and wraparound service needs of our students, to a one-size-fits-all at-risk add-on that consolidates some programs that address inequity in the funding formulas across the Commonwealth, to teacher mentorship programs, so that the newer teachers can have on-site, hands-on training from their peers to help them transition into their classrooms. I will, for I don't know how many years in a row now, put in a budget amendment to lift the cap on state funding of support personnel, which has been in place since the Great Recession. It has led to not only the state not paying our fair share for counselors, social workers, nurses, assistant principals, just to name a few, but it has meant that in those localities that can't make up the difference, those professionals are no longer in the building. And we have seen our students' mental health needs and their social work needs were not met before COVID. Now they're even worse. And Senator Dunnavant touched on the suicide risk that our students face. We have done risk assessments in our public schools for years. And what they tell us is the #1 risk to our students is that over 50% either have or want to do self-harm. And yet they don't have access when they need it to the mental health and social work professionals that can help address that threat. So those are areas that I will be pushing for. And then something equally as overdue is the state has not been funding for a number of years or helping our localities to fund school construction and renovation. Over 50% of our public school buildings are over 50 years old. I believe I chair a commission that did an analysis that found that there are $23 billion worth of school construction and capital needs across the Commonwealth that are not being met. So we will put legislation in to help address that. So those are a few of the areas I'll be working on, and I see I'm about to get the hook.
No hook here. Just again, a thank you for being with us tonight. And I want to also emphasize, I just put in the chat contact information for Senator McClellan. We'll put information for all of our legislative guests tonight. And I also wanted people to know that, you know, you've talked a lot about praising our positions and the work we've done together. I also want to thank you all for one other thing, which is, and people may not know this, the work we do every day. And that means a phone call, a text, a response to a question about a policy issue. The access that you give us, our staff and our federation and our community is incredible, and we can't thank you enough. So in terms of connecting the dots with what you're doing tonight with every day of the year and Advocacy Day, people need to know we are talking all the time, and that's the way it should be. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And before I bring on our other friend, Schuyler and Delegate VanValkenburg, I'll just give you a second to just, again, close. But thank you so much for just tonight and everything you do for us.
Well, again, you kind of stole how I was going to close, and that is our door is always open. And we hope that you don't just wait until your Advocacy Day to reach out to us. Reach out early and often, because we are here to serve you.
Well, thank you so much again. And Delegate, you are up in 3, 2, one. Here you go. So thank you. You have the floor.
All right. Well, thank you, David. Thank you everybody for being on here. Let me just start by saying I see a lot of friends on this call, and I really enjoy my working relationship with all of you, but especially David and Danny and Amy. We've been able to, I think, get a lot of stuff done in a lot of spaces, and I think it's been great. And we've been able to come together as a community as well, I think, in good times and unfortunately in bad, right? And I just speaking to your kind of priorities, I think it's been great working with David in particular on two of those and playing a small role in trying to help with the funding and help make sure we got the education bill to a good place in conclusion, and look forward to working on both of those moving forward. And obviously anything we can do to combat anti-Semitism is super important. I think it's a problem that we're seeing on both sides of the aisle. I can best control mine. And we're seeing that on campuses and in some other places, unfortunately. And so anything we can do to combat that, I think, is incredibly important. And as Senator McClellan noted, right, we oftentimes see a rise in racism and anti-Semitism at the same time, and we got to do everything we can to put the genie back in the bottle, right? And push it down and make sure that people know that it's not acceptable, and to make sure that our society is as welcoming, tolerant as possible. Speaking to my priorities, it's there's a lot of small things that I can go into detail on, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to bore us, and I'd rather hear your questions, quite honestly. There's a lot of tweaks to things I've already done, trying to extend on some things that I've already done. I think the biggest space I'm going to be in is education, and I was really planning on that, whether I was in the majority or the minority, and whether we had Governor McAuliffe or we had Governor Youngkin. One of the big spaces I played in the last 2 years was in voting access, voting rights, redistricting, and I'm going to try to do everything I can to make sure that those remain and those stay. But I really think there's a lot of things we can do in the education space, whether I'm carrying it or other folks are, like Senator McClellan or even Senator Dunnavant, or what's in the budget. There's a lot of education's been in the political sphere, right, both in the Virginia election and nationally, in a very partisan way, and we're going to have those food fights, I guess, but there's a lot of bipartisan stuff that we can get done, that I'm hoping we can get done, that I talked to Governor-elect Youngkin to say, hey, let's have these two lanes, let's have this lane where we can get the things done, and if we have to have food fights, we can have food fights too. But I'm really hoping that we can get a lot done in the budget space. There's some things that the Governor Northam's outgoing budget, I think, is incredibly important to protect a lot of the stuff he's talking about in the education space in particular, because it's taken us over a decade to finally get to a place where we're starting to recover education funding from the Great Recession, which was in 2009. Like, pretty much my entire teaching career has been affected by the budget cuts in the Great Recession. It has impacted all of our kids for that time. So there's stuff in there. There's also some stuff we need to reform how we fund schools. We've needed to do it for a long time. I think we're in a great opportunity to do it, and I'm going to try to make some movement towards that. We've got money in the budget, so it's a good time to do it. I think there's both geographical and partisan reasons to do it. I think we can get people on both sides of the aisle to support it. And so that's one space. Assessments. Anybody that's talked to me about education for more than 5 minutes knows that I hate the pendulum swing in education, where we don't test enough and then we test too much, or we do the 7-period day and then we do block scheduling, and we just like pendulum swing back and forth, which is we do in a lot of spaces in our lives. But in education, it drives me insane. And so we're currently in a backlash to testing phase, which is understandable, but also I think is a little wrong-headed. And so I'm going to try to put in legislation to get us in that middle ground, where we're testing a little less, but it's a little bit more impactful, and getting us the type of learning that we want in schools. So that's another piece that I'm going to really focus a lot of energy on. And then honestly, some of it we just don't know, because we don't know what the governor-elect is going to propose. We don't know what folks are going to fight over. And so there's a little kind of openness to what's going to be going on and what the lay of the land is going to be. And that's okay. And so, but I'm going to be spending a lot of my space there, I think. And if you want me to go into details on anything like non-compete clauses or, animals in apartments or anything like that, I'll gladly go into as much detail as you'd like. But I think you probably have questions that you'd rather have answered, so I'll stop there. But as always, it's a pleasure to be here. I hope next time we can do it in person. I love seeing you all, and look forward to continuing our relationship. And David, you're on.
Thank you, Schuyler. I really appreciate that. And actually, since you gave me a nice segue, I will say it. We of course have done these in person, and they're fantastic, and they have great food. And I know we've gotten a number of all of our legislators there when we did it. So I also hope we're in person next time, but with just as many in the room as are on our calls. We had 10 last year. We have about 7, actually we have 8 this year. So we want 8 to 10 to 12 of all of our legislators in the room, and that's what we hope for as well. The last thing I'll say to thank Schuyler before he goes, it's the same comment where the passion that each one of our legislators in the areas that they work in, whether it's a committee or whether it is just a passion of theirs, it's amazing. So thank you for all the different areas that you work in, all the areas that you support us on that we have in common. And the last thing is, every one of our programs is bipartisan. And we have in the past worked with every single one of the people on these calls in a bipartisan way. And we're going to continue doing that. So if that hasn't been emphasized enough, I just wanted to take one more moment to emphasize it, because whether whoever is in the majority really doesn't matter. We're going to keep doing our work the same way and representing our community, because everyone from every walk of life and every reflection on the political spectrum is in our community. And that's the work that we have to do. So again, thank you, Schuyler, for coming tonight, for giving us your insight. I'm going to kind of put Schuyler and I in the background in a moment, in our JCRC chair and our committee chair for legislative affairs and government relations are going to pose a couple of questions, and we'll see whoever wants to take it. Maybe I'll bring all 3 of you on, just so whoever wants to take a question can do it, and then I'll highlight that person if that sounds good. So again, thank you, Schuyler, and appreciate you coming on tonight. So Amy, I'm bringing you on, and I'm going to bring Richard on in just a second. Here you are. And I guess if there's any, I'm going to bring our legislators on, but if there's any questions that you two have gotten in the chat, or that you've kind of put together as one great question, why don't we have a little time? Let's ask something, and we'll see if our legislator, who wants to take it. So like I said, raise your hand and we'll see how that goes.
The only question I've seen so far, and I guess this could be one that each one answers. The question is this: how do we educate our community with regard to what CRT actually is and what it isn't, and how it manifests in the K-12 classrooms? Obviously, it's not CRT, but what is the manifestation that people are afraid of in classrooms?
So we have a hand, and please feel free, but I might leave all of you up just so we can have a conversation. If anyone wants to chime in, feel free.
So what critical race theory actually is a legal theory taught at Harvard Law School. I'm not even aware whether it is taught in any Virginia law schools, but it is a legal theory that teaches that how racism impacts policy and systems. And I'm oversimplifying, but that's basically it. That is not taught in any public school, K through 12, anywhere in the Commonwealth of Virginia. What people are afraid of depends who you ask. What I have heard and what I have been able to synthesize is a discomfort that some aspects of our history will make students feel guilty, uncomfortable, or something like that. And where I have seen people call out examples of critical race theory, it really is the history that is being taught that makes mostly white Protestant Anglo-Saxon people uncomfortable. But here's what's important. If we don't teach the good, the bad, and the ugly of our history and how it impacts us today, we'll be doomed to repeat it. And we will never, it is just a fact that there is inequity baked into some of our laws and systems because of decisions made decades and centuries ago by people. And people's political views are shaped by their life experiences, their beliefs, and what they know. So I think rather than getting caught up in the term critical race theory, we need to continue the conversation we started before that word ever entered into our lexicon about the importance of teaching a complete, honest, and accurate history in our schools and in our public history and to adults.
I mean, I can jump in just from the teacher perspective too, which is, I just want my kids to know the basic historical events of America. And if you look at the, curriculum, which anybody can access on the VDOE website, right, of, the US history class for high school or the world history class for high school or whatever, you can kind of see the framework of here are the themes you're supposed to teach, here are the events you're supposed to teach, maybe the people you're supposed to teach, right? I mean, at a survey level, as it's supposed to be, right? As it's supposed to be, it's, here's the broad sweep of what's happening. I guess the one thing I would add to what the senator said is I think there's a lot of conflating of different things, right? I think there's a conflating of teaching US history with kind of equity efforts in what like the human resource departments with teacher trainings, with kind of broader cultural things that we see happening in TV or movies or whatever. And I think that all kind of gets conflated, and the classroom is what we can control politically, right? But I mean, in terms of in the classroom, I was teaching the Gettysburg Address today. I just want the kids to know what the Gettysburg Address is. The Gettysburg Address is pretty sweet. So, I mean, I think when you peel it back to that level, but I could go into much more detail about it, but I think part of the issue is that there's a conflating of multiple different things happening. But when you're talking about in the classroom, right, and I'm sure there's anecdotes for anything, but when you're talking about what the average thing is trying to get done is we're trying to just teach the basic American survey of what's happening. And you don't have really the time where you can't really teach theories until you teach what's happened, right? And so you really, even if you wanted to bring a lot of those different kind of theories or interpretations in, it's really hard to do it anyway because you're moving so quickly and trying to get through everything. I don't know. If that helps.
Siobhan, did you want to chime in? You have your hand up.
Can you hear me? I'm having a little technical difficulty. Got it. Okay. I think that fundamentally, this all relates back to personal responsibility. I think that tolerance and kindness is a choice and a discipline. I think that we need to train our children to do critical thinking, to learn how to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes and listen to each other. I think that we need to have academic metrics in education so that we don't have kids falling behind in even some of the basics like math and reading and English. I think that this really drills down fundamentally to whether or not we're going to talk about what somebody else does or what we do. And when you throw a label on something, whatever it is, or you throw a label on a person, And that is your means by which you do not do the critical thinking, the introspection, the wanting to learn about another person, wanting to learn about education, theory, science, math. I think that's when we start getting into a trap. And I think we've gone the wrong way. And I think our opportunity for education going forward is to switch the conversation from whatever we've been talking about before, returning funding to the pre-recession rates. What metrics does that get us? I think we need to change the conversation to individual education. Every single child should have the opportunity to succeed. Every single child should be measured, not the system, not the school, not the SOL. We need to be making sure our kids can participate in the robust American experience. And I think that if we can get education back to metrics and children succeeding and personal responsibility and what you have the power to do instead of you trying to control somebody else, I think that's where we're going to succeed.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for being here this evening and listening to us. I want to thank you individually. Thank you, Senator Dunnavant. Thank you, Senator McClellan. And thank you, Delegate VanValkenburg. And I also want to emphasize to the Jewish community that advocacy, I have two analogies I use for it, and I'm going to date myself with the first one. You may remember the old cartoon, Horton Hears a Who. And the only reason they don't get boiled in diesel nut oil is because they all get together and shout, "We are here, we are here, we are here." And that's what we're doing. And that's why we do this and why I take the time to do this. The other one is when the kids are in the back seat and you say, "Where do you want to go for dinner?" and they won't tell you, and then they end up getting something they don't want. That's what happens if you don't answer the questions. So thank you to all the participants for being here. And again, thank you to the legislators for being here and talking to us and hearing our voices. And now I will defer to Daniel Staffenberg, who is the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond.
Thank you, Richard. It's good to see you, and thanks for those words. I now have to pivot a little bit on mine, but I will share with you that they mean a lot and they're well thought of. I want to thank, I'm going to stop calling them legislators or elected officials. The reality is each of you have become friends. And friends mean that we can have difficult conversations together, we can laugh together, we can celebrate the good times and wrestle together with the bad times. And each of you and the officials that'll be joining us tomorrow morning have really truly become friends. So I appreciate each one of you and for taking the time. And Senator McClellan, thank you. And we apologize to the kids. It's wonderful to see so many of our community come together tonight. I know, like so many of you, we're ready to be in a room having some brisket, and that time will come soon. I think you'll agree that we feel like we're at a pivotal moment for our community and maybe even for our country, both Jewish and general. We face challenges on so many fronts, but we also have historic opportunities and have shown over the past many months immense strength. Meeting these challenges is going to require a renewed focus, new ideas, and continued collective action. This begins with activating our community, a core value of what we are here tonight to do and what Federation is all about. We can be active in voice as we have tonight with thoughtful and difficult conversations that lead to meaningful and united action. We can be active physically, proclaiming Hineni, I am here for our community and for others, sharing our generosity of time and volunteerism. And lastly, as we're in the middle of our annual campaign, we can share our financial and other resource blessings with others. Our campaign is well underway, and I'm blessed, like so many of you, to have been able to see the power of each dollar we raise work in the community. Our goal is to reach the heights that we did last year when we broke records, knowing that each one of those dollars matters and results in food, support, and action together. I know a bunch of you are under 45 or aspire to be under 45 years of age. I did want to share that thanks to the generosity of a wonderful family, we have a unique match that any new gift to our campaign from someone under 45 is going to be matched dollar for dollar. So if you're not in that demographic, you can feel part of it by reaching out to a friend and saying, hey, please join us. Thank you again, Amy Melnick-Scharf, for your outstanding, steadfast leadership. I give you such immense credit for leading our community and so many others through what has been an interesting time. And to her professional partner, David Cohen, who every day shares his strength and wisdom for us. I am grateful to work alongside both of you. Thank you each for being here and doing so much good in our community. I hope you will join us tomorrow morning and at all of our upcoming events, both hybrid and in person. You can visit us at jewishrichmond.org or our new online reflectornews.org website to see everything that's going on at all of our synagogues and agencies and here in the Federation. Thank you again, and I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful evening.